Hey, it's Dan Morales, and this is Homebuyer Radio. I am back this week with my good friend
Rachel Gallegos with eXp Realty.
Okay, so last week I cut you short, right?
Yeah.
Like we started to talk about like the personal side of what you and I do, right?
Yep.
And that's something where I think again we're equally we have the same passion, right? Because we're talking about how it's easy to spend somebody else's money, I think people in the industry can almost get into a transactional mindset
100%.
where it's just me doing my job. This is what I do every day. I write loans every day. This is what I do. And, it's almost like, I don't want to say like you're taking an order, but like you're kind of taking an order.
For sure, yeah.
Do you want to supersize that house? But it's like, so you have that you can have that mindset, but then, you have to keep in mind, and this is something I always like to remind people, what we do is like this huge thing in people's lives, right? Like, you think about it, like I think of some clients where, because I've done this 31 years, I have some clients where I've helped them buy their very first house, which is this rinky dink, like they had to rub 2 nickels to get across the finish line, beg, borrow, steal, fix their credit. Like, they're at the beginning of they're just getting married to, now they just bought like an $800,000 house.
Yeah.
They're into their careers. They have a family, and in some cases I'm starting to write loans for their kids, which is really crazy, which tells me I've done this too long. Right. But you look at how that very first house changed the trajectory of their life.
It's like life changing.
Like, and I know, like, it can almost sound like cheesy, right? Like
it's so not cheesy. It's so real.
But it is, right? Like when you think of like, I have this story in one of my good clients, love her to death. I did this MSHDA loan, and like, the state fought me tooth and nail. The hardest loan I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, you're not turning this lady down. Like, this deal is getting done, man. Like, I fought all the way through, like, the head underwriter. I'm like, no, your program was meant for someone just like her.
Yeah.
She had come out of this, like, horrific, abusive relationship, all kinds of stuff, right? And so you go to this single mom who, nobody wanted to help her. We fought like no tomorrow to get her done, to this lady who now has a professional practice and legitimately is going to build an $800,000 house.
Yeah.
That would not have gotten done without that first property.
Yeah. And without you fighting for her, right?
Oh, like, yeah. But that's the stuff.
That's the heart.
That's the stuff that reminds me of, like, that's the kind of stuff I love.
Absolutely.
I love knowing that, what, we changed her life, but we changed the life of her kids too.
Absolutely.
Because,
that is the thing. Like, real estate creates generational wealth.
Oh, absolutely.
Generational wealth. Even if it's just, buying a home when you are 25 years old and living in that home until you die and your children get that home. You can't tell me a paid off home, 65 years later is not going to be worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for those children as adults, right?
Yeah.
I mean, regardless of the situation, real estate creates generational wealth, however you look at it. And it's a huge deal.
Oh, massive. And it's like this huge thing that legitimately changes people's lives. Because the other option is, I have a family member. She's rented her entire life. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you've paid how many people's properties off your entire lifetime because you just could never like connect the dots, right? It probably should have never got a mortgage too, but that's a different story. That's next week's podcast. No, but you think about it, like, for people where it's like, oh my gosh, it's this really big thing, and I think of when I bought my first house, and I bought it for my sister, like $53,200.
Yeah.
I remember, my monthly payment was like $521. Mm-hmm. And I remember like sitting in the parking lot after close, like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay this?
What am I going to do? Yeah.
I'm like, how am I going to pay this? They expect this every month.
That's so funny.
I'm like, how am I going to pay it? Like now I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I had that payment.
Yeah.
You couldn't even go buy a car for $500 a month, right? I'm like, I would kill to have that payment now. But it's one of those things where I look at it and I think, okay, had it not been for that first house, I never would have bought the second house, or the house after that, or built the couple houses I built, or things like that, because it took that very first kind of domino to fall to make the rest of them go. But it legitimately changed, my own personal, financial picture. my kids will benefit
Yeah.
from that. You know what I'm saying? It's those kinds of
Absolutely.
things where it's like, we are in the people business, right?
Yeah.
Like, of taking care of people, serving people. And it kind of goes back to like what you're talking about earlier, where it's like, hey, sometimes we tell people things they don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and not only that, but I just think that, like we said last time, I think that it's easy for people in our industry to lose sight of it
Totally.
and get caught up in the career, right? And then the
Totally.
things you get distracted by, it's I gotta do this marketing, and I've got to do this event, and I gotta do this, and I gotta do this to get more business. And it's like, for me, especially like this past year, just the slowdown that we felt.
Yeah.
When the market kind of started going back to normal, it helped me kind of get a little perspective again of like, hey, I got into this industry because I love relationships and I love people. And yes, I love real estate, but like the people are at the heart of the business.
Absolutely.
And they have to stay there, and it's easy to get distracted, and real estate becomes the heart of the business. As soon as real estate's the heart of the business and the people aren't, you're not going to be able to serve your clients properly.
No, because I think your interest you can lose alignment, right?
Absolutely.
And that's, where people think about like just, and I see this working with some agents where they're just about the transaction.
Yeah.
Get it closed. We don't care. And it's like, you clearly don't care what happens to your client, right?
Yeah.
You don't care, how they got across the finish line. If they had to rob, steal, whatever it took, they didn't care because they didn't care about the person, right?
Right.
But a lot of times those clients, when they go do a future transaction, they won't go back to the same agent. They'll come back to me.
Yep.
Because they know, like, because I'll walk them through things the right way, take care of them, be like, okay, here's what we got to do. Here's why. I want to make sure you understand it so that you know what you're committing to and good stuff like that. They'll come back to me, but they won't go back to the agent who they worked with because they didn't feel like that person looked out for their best interest. And you've seen this like I have. We've seen all of these people get into this business over the course of the last, probably couple years, and now you're starting to see a lot of them leave, which they should, because you really didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah.
You didn't know how to represent your client, and a lot of times they'd be like, well, what should I do? I'm like, I'm not your broker.
Yeah.
It's not my job to train you on how to sell real estate. I'm not even licensed to sell real estate. Like, how can I tell you what to do? Like, you clearly don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And here you are trying to help your client with this gigantic life decision.
So I know, such a big decision. It's such a life changing.
Totally.
I don't care if it's your first house or your 10th house. Like, it is a big thing.
Well, and that's talking about that, like that's we'll have to kick this into next week because that's actually you have like these great like the first house or 10th house, because people will think like, oh, I know how the game's played, blah blah blah. Guess what? Things change.
Yeah.
Right. Markets change.
Yeah.
Things change, and that's a great talk for next week. How do people get a hold of you?
So they can call me. My telephone number is 616-566-2401, or they can email me at rachelgallegosrealtor@gmail.com, and that is spelled Gallegos.
And I'm Dan Morales with Dart Bank. My MLS number is 709-729. The Dart Bank, of course, is an equal housing lender. You can find me online at danmorales.com. That's MORALEZ.com. Or you can call me at 616-931-4629. Thanks for living. Thanks for listening and living. We're glad you're living too, right? Have a great day. See ya.